children, before we start into today's class, let us have a short recap of what we did in our previous class. We had learned the format of writing a postcard and the format of writing a composition based on the given verbal input. I hope the previous class has given you a brief idea as to how to write a postcard and a composition. So now, getting back to today's class. This class is a short story from The Best Christmas Present in the World by Sir Michael Morpurgo. So this story is about a letter. So what do you think, children? Do you all want to have a war? Is it pleasant having a war? Don't we all feel, instead of two countries fighting, what if they sit together and have a talk instead of having a war? Wouldn't that be nice? So this chapter is going to take us into a short story about a small war. So this is about the author who bought a roll-top cupboard. It's like a bureau. So I have drawn a picture to give you an image of what is a roll-top bureau. So the roll-top bureau is something like a computer table or a long table with short drawers at the bottom. So he had bought this table at a junk shop. The person who sold it to him told him that it was in a bad condition and sold it at a very cheap price for him because this was taken out from a place which got into fire. So he was cleaning this roll top on a Christmas Eve. A Christmas Eve is a day before Christmas. So the author decided to clean this roll top. So he was opening every drawer and cleaning. And one drawer which was kind of stuck, and he pulled it and he found an envelope in it. Now comes to the next topic, the letter. So he had opened the drawer. The drawer was something 19th century old, made of oak wood. And this drawer had a secret space. It is from the secret space that he found the envelope. Now he took open the envelope and read the letter. In the letter it said, Jim's last letter, received January 25th, 1915. To be buried with me when time comes. So this was the message that was written in the letter, and an address was there. Mrs. Jim Macpherson, 12, Copper Beaches, Bridport. So this was the address that was given on the letter with this message. So the author started to read the message. The first that he came up was the unforgettable moments. So this was about the English and German war. So this was about two armies fighting a war. It was on Christmas Day when this letter was written. So it was said that the English and German were fighting the war, and on Christmas Day they were all quiet and silent. And suddenly they saw on the no man's land the Germans waving a white flag. So the no man's land is something between two borders of a country. There is a center land that is called a no man's land. So if this is India and this is Pakistan, the center space is called the no man's land. So in the no man's land they saw a white flag waving. So the English were a bit worried. So they suddenly saw the Germans moving forward, and they moved forward wishing them Happy Christmas. So imagine in the war field, an opponent country walks forward and wishes someone. So the moment you see someone walking forward and in a war field, so it gives you a slight fear and creates a small panic between the people. But the Germans came up offering German wine and canned meat. It was a moment of peace between the English and the German army. There were no rifles. Rifles are guns. So there were no rifles, and a German officer had come forward meeting McPherson. McPherson, actually, the German officer introduced himself that I am from Dusseldorf. My name is Hans Wolf. I play the cello in an orchestra. So Mr. Hansworth introduced himself that he is from a place called Dusseldorf and he plays the cello. And McPherson in turn introduces himself that he is a school teacher from Dorset. So the German officer and McPherson introduce themselves. So he is a cello player in an orchestra and McPherson is a school teacher from Dorset. So the word Dorset, immediately Hansworth remembered and he said, I know Dorset. So the topic here is Dorset and Hardy. So Hans Wolf said, I know Dorset, but I have never been to England. But he speaks English very well. He knew English and he also knew an author, Thomas Hardy. So he has read from the books of Thomas Hardy, Far from the Madding Crowd. So here you can see is Hansworth has never been to Dorset, but he knows this place very well and he speaks English very well. And he likes the book written by Thomas Hardy, Far from the Madding Crowd. And McPherson shared his Christmas cake with Hans Wolf. And Hans Wolf was very happy eating the cake and he said it was the best marzipan ever tasted. So marzipan is a cake with almonds and fruit toppings. So he liked the cake that was made by McPherson's wife. And they had a wonderful Christmas party. So they had shared the cake that was made by McPherson's wife and they enjoyed the Christmas party. As the day was going on, few of the soldiers decided to play football, but McPherson and Hans Wolf cheered and clapped the crowd playing football. They just thought for themselves, why wouldn't it be nice if we have a football match instead of a war? So imagine the mind of the army officers. They felt that a football match is better than having a war. So then came into the end of the celebrations. They all had good eatables and drinks. And at the end of the day, it was time to part. The moment brought a lot of sadness and calmness among the army officers. So they saluted each other and walked away unwillingly. After all the enjoyment they had to walk away unwillingly. In the night, the Germans were singing carols, and in turn, this English army officers exchanged carols. So imagine at one end in the night, the Germans were singing carols and the English were also singing carols. That was the moment when McPherson wrote a letter to his wife to treasure those moments. Imagine what a beautiful moment McPherson would have had on the war field. A war field where they shared cake, enjoyed football and had a good chat with each other. Then came the hope. McPherson hoped the war to end. So writing the letter, he had written that he hoped the war to end. He wanted both the armies to be together as they still cherished that moment together. So now, coming to the end of the letter, the authors decided, okay, it is right time to give the letter back to the person who actually needs it and owns it. So the author decided to give the letter and he drove to the given address As I said, the given address, Mrs. Jim McPherson, 12 Copper Beaches, Bridport. So he drove down to the place. When he went there, he found out that the place had been burnt. So it was a complete burnt out place. And it was said that Mrs. McPherson, the wife of Mr. McPherson, was in that fire. She was 101-year-old and she was in that fire and later taken to a nursing home. So he decided to go meet Mrs. McPherson. So the author went to the nursing home. Over there he met the matron. Matron is like the head nurse at a nursing home. So Mrs. McPherson was sitting there in a chair. Imagine the moment the author is having the letter in his hand and he's going to meet Mrs. McPherson, who's sitting in the chair, who is around 100 years old. So she looked vacantly. In the meaning, she was just unaware of who he was and why was he coming to meet her. But as he walked, her eyes lit up when he called her Connie. Just imagine, he called her Connie. Connie was the word that was in the letter that Mr. McPherson called his wife Connie. Her eyes immediately lit up and all the vacant thought that she had just went away. And he gave her the letter. And he also told her how he got the letter from the roll top. She was actually not listening. Imagine he's trying to tell her, I got the letter, I was trying to clean, it was from an old roll top. But she was actually not listening. She just took his hands. Her eyes filled up with tears. And she looked at him and said, Jim kept his promise. So Jim here is Mr. McPherson. So she just looked at the author and said, Jim kept his promise, and kissed his cheek. And it is Christmas Eve, and she said that Jim had promised he will come on Christmas Eve. She talked lovingly to the author and she told him this is the best Christmas present in the world. So what do you think that Mrs. McPherson thought when the author walked in? She actually thought that he was Mr. McPherson, and that's how the eyes filled with tears and her eyes were lit up with joy. So she just thought and she felt that her husband walking by came to him as he had promised that he will be on Christmas Eve. So this was the best Christmas present ever in the world for Mrs. McPherson. I hope children you have understood today's lesson.